Welcome to the War Story Podcast with me, Gary Jones. For those of you who join us for the first time, we have two formats of podcast over here at the Veteran State of Mind Network. We have Veteran State of Mind, where we talk about people's experiences after the military, and then we have War Stories, where we talk about their experiences during deployments. Got another great guest for you today. Before we get into it, though, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody who picked up a copy of my book, D-Day, The Unheard Tapes. It made number one on the Sunday Times bestseller list, which is the first time I've ever had that in my life. And it was really special considering what the book was about. They're not my stories. They are stories from people who were involved in the Battle of Normandy from all sides. So it means a lot that you guys supported that. So thank you very much. I also want to thank you for sharing the podcast. And I'll tell you why it's so important that we share the podcast, guys. So I've been looking into recently, like how, like the number of downloads that podcast gets and all that kind of stuff. And recently, like with some of these updates that come on your phone's kind of operating system, some of the recent ones now it basically kind of means that if someone's had automatic downloads on for a podcast in the past, that might no longer be the case with recent updates. So even if you think all your mates know about new episodes, they might not because of these recent updates. So please, please, please share the podcast with your friends. You can text the link to your friend, you can share it on social media, or you can use your share button in the middle of your face and tell someone about it. We need you guys to tell people about the podcast. We don't use ads or anything like that. We're fully reliant on you guys to share it. So if you feel like you get something from the podcast, if you want to support the guests and share their stories, then please, 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 please tell someone about it. Even if it's just one person, that would help a lot. All right. Today's guest is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps and the war in Afghanistan. His name is Jeff Bodell, and he is an author of The Warfighter's Lounge, a Marine's experience of combat in Marjah, Afghanistan. He's absolutely top bloke, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So without further ado, please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Jeff Bodell. Jeff, welcome to the podcast, mate. Good to have you on. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Mate, it's a pleasure. Been kind of following you on social media for a while now. Always enjoy your posts, enjoy your kind of like little war stories in there, which is obviously what we're all about out here. One thing that I always like to kick off with is, we get a bunch of different answers on this. It's always kind of fascinating is to figure out like what kind of drew somebody to not just the military, but like, the kind of the tip of the spear in the first place. Because, there's a lot of people that join for college and things like that. And there's some people who join because they want to get in amongst it, so to speak. So can you remember like when in your life you had that kind of first moment that you can remember where you were drawn to kind of like the military and the idea that you might serve yourself?
The earliest is probably, I was born in 88. So I had Boy Scout camp for my older brother in 92. The Marine Corps silent drill team was there and they did a demo and they gave, a little 4-year-old me an MRE. And I just have the faint memories of that and thinking how cool it was. And my whole childhood, I had like Marine Corps posters and stickers in my bedroom. The 9/11 happened, and I watched Top Gun too much. And I wanted to be a naval aviator or a Marine Corps aviator. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And so I'm like, well, if I want to be a fighter pilot, I got to go to college. And then I joined the Navy Sea Cadet Corps, which is like a youth group, when I was like 13. I had to wear that little white Navy hat and the bell-bottom pants. And I had like this 2-week boot camp as a 13-year-old where they're yelling at me up in West Point, New York. But doing that one weekend, all they had me do at this Sea Cadet Corps thing was sweeping their drill center and cleaning for them. I was like slave labor. I remember just sweeping the floor and mopping the floor and looking out the window. And there's a group of young Marines outside, like doing cool stuff. And I'm cleaning. I'm like, this isn't for me. So I had my grandfather was in the Virginia National Guard, and then he was drafted into the Army near the end of the Korean War. He would always tell me stories about his time in the military as a kid and as a teenager, and it really drew me to that because he was so proud of his service, even though it was a short period of his life. So that's kind of why I decided to join. But I tried to talk about joining the Marine Corps when I was graduating high school, And the Marine Corps recruiter just said, you're going to go infantry, you're going to go active duty. I'm like, well, I want to go to college so I can be a fighter pilot. And he said, no, you don't want to do that. So he wasn't listening to me. So I went to college and I got involved in Army ROTC there. So when I graduated college, I could be a commissioned officer in the Army. They offered me a scholarship to pay for my school, a lot of money, some other stuff. And I got drunk one night and met a Marine who was in the reserves. And I found out I could enlist in the Marine Corps and be in college at the same time. And, 19-year-old me thought that was a great idea.
So how does that work then? How can you be in the Marine Corps and at college at the same time?
So there's the Marine Reserves, which typically you join the reserves and you do all the basic training, your job training, all in a row. Then you go to your reserve unit and finish your contract. Well, there's a special program that if you're a full-time college student and you're currently enrolled, they have this program where you only do your schools and your boot camp during the summers, so it doesn't interfere with your fall and spring semesters of college. So it split my training up over 3 years instead of one continuous string.
So you're basically like, whenever you have a break from college, you're like full-time essentially. Okay, that's interesting. Obviously, one thing I think is kind of, well, it's kind of pertinent to Brits as well, but obviously, especially Americans, is obviously, the quote-unquote 9/11 moments. So I guess you'd been in high school at the time.
Yeah, I was in 7th or 8th grade, I think. I was, for you, that would be like 13, 14 years old, something like that.
And how did that, can you remember that moment? What was it like for you? And it sounds like you were already on the path to the military. Did it change kind of what you wanted to do or anything like that?
I think I joined the Sea Cadet Corps after 9/11 because all those patriotic Dick Cheney things were out then, the freedom fries and all that stuff. But I do think that really pushed it, because I don't know what it was like in the UK, but here for a teenager in the immediate years after 9/11, it was, super patriotic environment. The pro-war propaganda was extreme. And when I was 17, 18, I was like, yeah, I want to go to Iraq and fight people. Iraq didn't do 9/11, but that's, we don't know any different, I guess, at that age. Easy to be manipulated, I think.
And what was your kind of family's thoughts and feelings towards you going into service?
My dad was supportive of me doing the Army ROTC and becoming an officer. I think he thought it was kind of a bad idea to abandon that and just be an enlisted Marine because financially it doesn't really make any sense. And also, this was the peak of two wars, 2006, 2007, when I made this decision. So that, now that I'm older, I realized that, my dad was concerned that I'm going to go fight these wars. And my mom, on the other hand, she was also concerned, but she was supportive. It was her father that was in the Army and the National Guard that really drove me to join. So my mother was obviously concerned like a mother would be, but she was supportive of it. I do remember my granddaddy I remember he was very supportive and very proud of me when I decided to enlist and about my service.
What was your peer group in school? Were they all kind of along the same kind of lines of thinking as you, or did they or was the military not something that they considered?
I had a bigger split. I had a pretty big school. I think a lot of the guys that were on the sports teams and stuff like that, let's go to the military. Let's go. We enlisted and joined during a time of war. So we weren't joining the military for education or to travel. It was, you knew your destination. I think there's 3 people from my high school that were killed in action.
Oh my gosh.
During the Gulf War and terrorism. Then you go to college, and I kind of surrounded myself with Army ROTC cadets, so they had a similar mentality. But even in the college, it was obviously a lot of very diverse people. So places all over the place, whether pro-war, anti-war, pro-troops. But at the time, I don't think anybody really differentiated Iraq from Afghanistan. It was all just over there.
That's interesting. So how did you end up then going from the reserves while at college into full-time grunt?
So I was a military police officer in the reserves. My unit was all MPs. We never did the law enforcement stuff. It was more field operations, convoy security, force protection, prisoner transfers, detainee operations, more combat-oriented stuff. And 2009, Obama said he's announcing 30,000 troops to go to Afghanistan. And right before that, summer of 2009, they picked a platoon from my company, handpicked pretty much the best people they could, or the people they thought would be assets, to go on a deployment, because our sister company was doing a company-wide deployment to go do field MP, Force Pro, convoy security stuff in Afghanistan. So I went and mobilized. In December of 2009, I did my pre-combat, pre-deployment training, and the day before we leave our training, we have everything completed. We found out that the sister company's deployment got canceled. In the reserves, once you mobilize a reservist or mobilize a reserve unit, they're mobilized. They're on active orders, and it's pretty hard to pull that back. And we wanted to go. So our CEO and our leadership called the headquarters of the Marine Corps, every Marine Corps division there was, to try to find somebody that needed 42 Marines to go with them to Afghanistan. And we found a unit. They were low altitude air defense guys, and they were going to do base security somewhere. We weren't pleased about it, but it got us into Afghanistan. And then within 10 minutes of landing in Afghanistan, we were told we're not going to be with them anymore. Our 42 Marines are separating from that battalion, and we're going to do our own thing. And they tried to find us a mission. They just dumped Marines in Afghanistan, and my CO and Gunny just walked around and said, "Hey, I got 42 MPs. We need a mission." And a general overheard, like, "Hey, you got MPs? We have this new mission, new directive that's been pushed down from McChrystal or whoever for police mentor teams." So we had 42 guys, and we were split into 5 teams spread across Afghanistan, 3 in Marjah, and 1 in Musa Kayla, and 1 in Al-Zad. And I know I'm pronouncing those incorrectly because I don't know.
I think we all pronounce them incorrectly, mate. It's all right. I understand what you mean. People will.
Yeah. We literally just tried to get into Afghanistan and find the mission, and I ended up being helicopter inserted into the largest battle of the war in Afghanistan for the U.S.
So this would have been, early 2010 by the time you get out there?
Yeah, I think Marjah kicked off on February 10th, 2010. That was the push. I got on an airplane leaving the United States on February 13th, and I got into Marjah in March. That was March to September.
So where would you go in between? Was it Leatherneck that you went through? Or?
I think we landed in Kandahar, but we spent about 3 weeks on Leatherneck and Bastion. We just said, "Hey, we're here. Our mission doesn't start for 3 weeks. Can we volunteer and help you guys out?" Which was probably a mistake, but we did get to work with some Brits and some Bahrainis and stuff. So
what was that like? Can you tell us what you're doing with the Brits?
Yeah, there's the main entry control point in Camp Leatherneck. These big commercial trucks coming through. The Brits were in charge of it. They had working dogs. They searched all these trucks. They occasionally find things, contraband, pressure cookers, things that could be IEDs. And they had like a little Hesco wire, 6 by 6 foot bin of contraband that they seized every day. So they sent us, MPs in there, just in the country. We're bored. We want something to do. We found more contraband in one shift than the Brits found in 2 weeks. Because they're like, "You guys are taking this a little too seriously," but we wanted something to do.
So when you go out on a deployment, how long are you looking at spending in theater?
9 months.
Okay. And do you get is that broken down, or could you be expected to be on the ground for 9 months, or is there some kind of rotation, or how does that work?
Typically, the Marine Corps has pretty much always been 9 months. So, 9 months in country and you come back. In the reserves, it's a little different. Our orders are written for a year. But once you get back to the States, you can stay on your orders on active duty and just finish your time, or you can leave the active duty the day you get home, which I did. I went back to college. Probably a mistake, but...
Right. So let's talk about this kind of role they're giving you, the mentoring then. Is that something that you guys had ever covered in training? Is that something like is quite often falls under the MP thing, or is that like it was one of those ones of we need warm bodies? That's you guys, and here's a job. Figure it out.
Yeah, they were given a mandate like this is what we're doing, and they thought, oh, hey, MPs, police officers, like that seems like a natural fit. So figure it out. No, there was no training, no nothing. At the time, it wasn't really a thing. Now, from my understanding, a lot of what the Marine Corps MP mission is training other countries and getting them ready. So it's evolved because of this need. Prior to that was really a special forces thing. Green Berets that would be embedded. There wasn't really a whole bunch of advisors and mentors that were, just normal Marines and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like one of those things that, like, if we think of the Marines as a left hand and the Brits out there as the right hand, then maybe one wasn't talking to the other, because that's definitely something that was happening for a couple of years up until that point. And maybe that was just something that kind of got like, oh, by the way, like we work with these guys that you're going to have to take over. Oh shit. Now we're out, right, so how did you guys prepare for that once you're on the ground and you know that job is coming? How did they get you like kind of this last minute preparation of, right, how the fuck are we going to do this?
Well, luckily, like I said, they kind of handpicked everybody for our deployment. So we were very heavy in terms of our non-commissioned officer leadership and experience. So we had a lot of good guys with us, and we just adapt, figure it out. It started with, all right, there's some police officers here. Let's go see what they're doing, see how competent they are, write the reports, send it up to the generals. The generals say, we don't care about them raping children. We don't care about them taking bribes. Like that's to be expected. But then they leave. Then we get other police officers come in that we're actually working with. So all of our, evaluation is out the window. But a lot of it was just in stages, like a crawl, walk, run. Like we're going to go out on a patrol. The Marines are going to lead it. We're going to plan it. You're going to come with us. Then it would be, hopefully show up to formation with your boots. Next week, show up to formation with your boots tied for patrol. And by the end, it was, the police officers were planning their own patrols, going out doing their own operations, and we would be a little more hands off. But realistically, when at part of it, majority of my deployment, I was a 4-man team, and we had 96 police officers. So constantly going out to missions, and it's like, you rotate through the police officers so they get experience, but I'm doing 6 patrols for every one that they do.
Right.
It's a lot,
You mentioned like the things that kind of to be expected at working with those kind of partner forces in Afghanistan. Was that something that you got passed down to you before you met up with them? Like, look, these are some of the kind of things you might expect. Or was it like, the things about the bribes, the things about the thing with the children? Or was that something that you just kind of like that you learned that on the fly and it was the kind of the culture shock moment? Well, I say culture shock, but you know what I mean?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, we had some cultural training stuff before we deploy so we can try to not embarrass our country. But then you just experience it and live it and pick it up as you go. It's, I say they were raping kids, and it's like, this one group of police officers was. But that wasn't all of them. And that wasn't the ones I worked with. The ones that I worked with probably would have executed somebody if they did that.
Right. Okay. And what do you think that comes down to?
Personal integrity, the leadership of the Afghan commanders. I worked with a few different things. So I worked with the Afghan Civil Order Police. They were like a national police force. They all were what I would consider veterans. They had been in for at least 5 years. They knew their job. They were not from Marjah. They were from Kabul. So they're more of a coin counterinsurgency force. And then the later ones I worked with were more Afghan local police and uniformed police. Some of their leadership was good, but they were less trained, less experienced. So it was a big difference going from, semi-special forces kind of equivalent down to, local police officer kind of thing. But you have to adapt and evaluate your expectations accordingly.
So when you first went in there then, because it was kind of like an ongoing kind of dynamic operation at the time, would they bring in these kind of like more specialist, more veteran kind of police units while things were kind of, like for the kind of the break-in, so to speak. And then as things kind of became more settled, then they'd start pulling them out to maybe a different area and then filtering in these other like kind of like fresher ones.
I only had the small E3 Lance Corporal perspective of the battlefield.
Right.
You say that it does probably, yeah. The first police in Marjah were not local police. There was no such thing as a local police force. Locals were not employed or trained. It takes time to do that. So these other ANCOP policemen came in from Kabul and elsewhere, and it was basically a deployment for them. They would be there for 9 months, go back to Kabul, rotate with another one, because there was no real government presence in Marjah prior to that.
So can you tell us a bit more about Marjah, what the kind of battle was there and what the kind of situation was on the ground when you arrived?
So Marjah was supposed to be the big battle to eliminate the last Taliban strongholds in Afghanistan. They're going to go in, this whole new doctrine, I'd say they, like the generals and planners, the top brass, of going into a city, holding it, seizing it, staying there, and developing it, as opposed to just, pushing through. And we told the Taliban, we're coming here, everybody else leave. It was like probably ringing the dinner bell for the warfighters. They came from Pakistan and everywhere else. I read it was in the newspaper, Marine Corps Times, years ago. I don't remember the number, but it was something like 9,000 IEDs were found in a 3-month period in Marjah, which sounds accurate from my experience. It's not mountainous terrain. It's flat, and it's grid patterned, north, south, east, west, roads, canals, ditches, and it's all farmland. Each field on the outside of it has trees and buildings and compounds and walls and irrigation ditches. So our engagements were typically 200 to 400 meters, which pretty close. And the Taliban can run all around you, use motorcycles, cars, and they could be a couple hundred meters from you, and you'll never see them because there's just too much vegetation, too much buildings and structures in the way, and there's pretty much no way to gain an elevation advantage over your enemy there. And if anybody's ever walked through a freshly plowed field with 60, 80 pounds of gear, it's tough terrain. You can't keep your footing on it.
So when you went out on these patrols, then it would be you guys and your team. How many kind of police would you have with you for like that 4-man team? How many police are you dealing with?
As a 4-man team, we had to take 6 minimum. So it was between 6 or 8, because we had to have 8 or 10 guys out in the patrol to lead the wire. So we would have our 4 Marines and 6 to 8 police officers, and we would just walk around. We would go walk to the police checkpoints, but we couldn't go to all our police checkpoints because they're too far. The checkpoints were like little listening posts, outposts, where we had like a squad of police officers stay and do vehicle checkpoints and search for people. So we partnered up with a group of infantrymen and mortarmen that had a truck, because they only had 1 truck, so they couldn't go outside the wire, or they had 2 or something. You had to have a certain amount of vehicles if you're going to leave with vehicles. But our Afghans had Humvees, so we would take 2 Humvees and 2 of their trucks. So that gave us the magic number of 4. So we would go out. They would drive us to the police checkpoints. We would dismount. The infantry guys would just stay there and do nothing, just chilling. They earned it, though. And we would go, the police officers, and we would do satellite patrols around their police checkpoints, maybe a kilometer and a half in a circle, or we would do multiple little circles around their checkpoint just to check out the area, talk to people, look for IEDs that are planted, to try to hit us or the police officers. A lot of it was just talking to the folks, be like, hey, we want to help you. Where's the Taliban? Tell us where they are. We'll go kill them. And the answer was always the same. It's like, the Taliban just watched you come in here. If I talk to you, they're going to kill me once you leave. Like, you're here right now, but you're not going to be here in 20 minutes. So a lot of that. Yeah, we just tried to, I don't know. I talked to a coworker of mine recently. And I was like, I was there for 9 months, probably 7 months in Marjah. And I did about 330 foot patrols, which is well more than one a day. But they weren't like 5-day long foot patrols. It would be, 3 hours long, 4 hours long, something like that. Morning, afternoon, evening, nighttime.
So when you're out looking for IEDs with these guys, did the Afghans you were working with, did they have that almost like that kind of sixth sense that like local people sometimes have about what to look for and where, or were they just kind of like learning on the fly like you were?
They probably had some street smarts. It was nice that they could mostly communicate with the locals. But for the first half of my deployment, it almost seemed like the Taliban didn't want to engage my team because maybe they didn't want to shoot Afghans, or maybe, we just got lucky because there's firefights all around us constantly. Like maybe we just never got hit for being lucky or something. But then halfway through, we were getting hit, indiscriminately because what I was told and what I think is more foreign fighters were coming in from Pakistan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, wherever. And they didn't care if they're shooting at Afghan police officers. It's not their countrymen.
So what was the first time you got contact?
I was in a few situations where we took some fire, pot shots, and we, dashed for cover, stuff like that. Nothing extreme. Maybe an RPG or two while we're out, and nothing would come from it. The first time that I was in like a bad firefight was June 28th, exactly 14 years ago. There was the four of us. We went on a foot patrol with some police officers, walked up to one of our police checkpoints, checked in with them, see what's going on. We decided to do a satellite patrol around there. We walked through this field. We go in this big building, took a 5-minute break, drink some water, and there's some little kids there. And we called them over, and it's like, you guys see any Taliban? He's like, oh yeah, there's Taliban right over there. They're all over the place. I was having a bad day. It was hot. And I was so complacent. I was like, these kids are lying. There's no Taliban here. Like, because the 1-6 battalion was pretty fierce. The Marines there, they fought hard. And like, this place was relatively safe. Like the Taliban wouldn't come this close to our base. But most of 1-6 just went home. They were doing the transition of the new battalion. So the new battalion 2-6 just started doing some missions there. Coincidentally, this was the same week where we received a Taliban phone call that referred to us as the Devil's Cowboys. But, these kids were there. They said, Taliban are there. And I said, yeah, they're full of shit. And these women and some children started walking away through the field. And I was like, oh, that's odd. Like, looking back on it, like, obviously, that I know it's about to happen, but I thought nothing of it because, it was hot. And so I get told we got to move out, leave the building. And, it's a 200-meter wide field, paths on either side of tree lines and ditches. And we decided to go through the field because there's probably IEDs on the paths, right? Well, we're walking, and all of a sudden I just hear this machine gun just ripping away. And I look up, and the point man is now going the opposite direction we were walking. And I don't know if you ever saw the A-Team TV show in America with Mr. T.
Oh, yeah.
Well, in the A-Team, every time they shoot the guns, like, the bullet impacts the dirt by their feet right behind him. It was exactly like that. He was sprinting, and every step behind his feet, bullets were just impacting the dirt. He jumped in the air, did like a 180, landed down on his chest, firing while he's in the air. And then I yelled, the stupidest thing ever, contact. And it's pretty clear we're in contact. But my first thought was like, that's really loud. Are we getting shot at? And I see him getting shot. I was like, oh, we're getting shot at. So, I was in the middle of this field and freshly plowed, no cover, no plants, no nothing. And I just dive on the ground and, bullets coming from my front to the west. And I was like, where are they? Where are they? I had an AK-47 with me with 2 magazines. And I was thinking, I really wish I had more ammo right now.
Sorry, so you're using AK-47s?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just posted a picture on Instagram of me that day with the AK. Yeah, I'm yelling at my team at the corporal, and he's shooting away. I try to see where they're coming from. I shoot a couple rounds into a window of a building, and I look over and I see the corporal team leader like face down in the dirt, not moving. was like, oh, fuck. He just got domed, man. So I'm screaming his name, love, love, just screaming. Are you hit? Are you hit? No response. And I was like, the fire was so fierce. I was like, I can't do anything right now. I can't move. And in the Marine Corps, they talk about, School of Infantry training and Marine combat training and all this other stuff, save your life. And what I did that day all came from what I was taught at boot camp. I crawled into a tire tractor rut. That was the only micro terrain available to me. I popped up, shot a couple rounds, and got down because I was thinking, hey, they told me at boot camp it takes 2.4 seconds for a marksman to gain a sight on you and shoot at you and don't pop up at the same place. So I dragged my face on the dirt and reached my left hand out forward, like pulled the dirt, pushing off my toes. I couldn't do a low crawl because I would have got shot. And I'm dragging my face in the dirt, and there's just rain of gunfire going over me. And I see a little roly-poly pill bug in the dirt.
Is that a caterpillar? Is that like, sorry, just because I'm not familiar with that.
All right, it's technically a land crustacean. If you dig them in the ground, they'll roll up into like a curled up ball.
Okay.
They're about a half-inch long, maybe. A white little grub-looking thing, like this tiny centipede. And I'm looking at this thing, and I think, oh, roly-poly, because that's what we call them here. Then my next thought is, I'm gonna die looking at a fucking bug. And I knew at that moment, like I was not getting out of that field alive. And the weird thing about that was I was just completely at peace with it. Like, yeah, this is just what's going to happen. But I was like, I'm just going to keep fighting though until it happens. But I did feel bad because I thought that my team was going to get hurt or killed trying to get my body out of that field. And I pushed out, Africa militant style with one hand with the AK and let off a burst because I couldn't sit up. Crawled forward again and popped up and did like a little combat roll because we started getting shot from the north now. They went from the west to the north. And I look over to my left, or my right, I was going to tell the Afghan police officer that was next to me, like, hey, light up that tree line, shoot that tree line. And I look over and he's gone. I was like, what the fuck? So then I look over to my left shoulder to where the Marines were, and they're gone. And so I roll over my back, look behind me, and everybody's gone. I'm the only one in the field. So I'm the only target for all the Taliban there. And I see they all made it to the ditch on the south side of the field. And the corporal pops up and he's like waving at me to get up and run to the ditch. And I looked at him and said, no, man, no, not until you shoot. So he started shooting. I got up, and I don't know if I screamed it or if I said it in my head, but I definitely did it. It was, I'm up, they see me, I'm down, and I flopped on the ground. And as soon as I did that, it was just like a wall of bullets over my head. Then it took one more, I'm up, they see me, I'm down, then I jumped into the ditch feet first. But before I did that, when I was crawling, I heard this whistling noise. And I was like, I never heard that noise before. And like stuff hit me in the face. So I thought like maybe that was a bullet that got so close to my face, like it scared me. So I got my radio and I clicked the button and I said, guys, I almost got shot in the face. And so when I got back to the ditch, they're looking at me like, you got shot in the face? I was like, no, I don't think so. And they looked at me. He's like, no, you're good. You didn't get shot in the face. It's like, I didn't say I got shot in the face. So I'm like arguing about this in the middle of a firefight. And so all of us now are in the ditch. One of the guys got the two little Afghan boys in the ditch. All the police officers are in the ditch. Bullets are just impacting on the far side behind their heads. And we're getting shot at from the west, the northwest, the north. And then now all of a sudden we started taking fire from the south. And the most junior guy with us, Lance Corporal Weston, he's like, hey guys, let's go assault through that building. I was like, bro, we're surrounded. And there's 4 of us. He's like, oh, okay. But we ended up going back to the building and holding that until the QRF showed up. But that was my first like serious fight. And yeah, I'd say that was probably my first like real firefight.
And how were you feeling when you kind of finally kind of broke contact and got out of that?
Bad, like real bad, physically. The QRF showed up there like 400 meters away on the road in their trucks. They didn't get out. I was like, why aren't they getting out of the trucks? They're just chilling, Typically when trucks show up, the Taliban are like, oh yeah, let's stop shooting. 50 cals are scary. But like I had to run from the building into another ditch to provide cover for the other guys to move. But when I did that, I like went full out sprint. And this was after like being sick and everything else. And my legs burnt so bad that I physically couldn't stand. So they're like, hey, Bodell, go up front. I was like, no, I got rear security. You guys keep going. I didn't want to tell them I couldn't stand. But eventually I did. And the guy at the truck gave me a bottle of water. And I drank that too fast and instantly threw up all over myself. And I remember when I got back to base, I took off my body armor. And I just could not fathom that the Camelback, the hydration kit on the back of my body armor, wasn't shredded with bullets. Like I was so certain that bullets just would have shredded it. But after that, though, it's like, oh shit, we made it through that. You're 22 years old, you feel invincible. Like, let's go do it again.
So, when you run in the ditches and stuff. At that point, like, because you'd gone in the field because you didn't want to go down the possibly ID tracks. When you're then taking these kind of bits of cover on your way back, is it in your head like, fuck, this might be ID'd? Or are you just like, better the devil at this kind of point?
I thought I'm going to get shot in the back of the head because the Taliban's still 200 meters away from me. That's the only thing I was thinking about.
Yeah. So when you were patrolling then, when you were out there, you mentioned the point man. Are you leading with your own guys, or are you using the Afghan to walk point? Like, how are you kind of working out the patrol formation?
So when I was a 4-man team, one of the Marines was the point man. I was always tailing Charlie because the one time that I was the point man, they complained I was walking too slow because I was looking for IEDs too much, and we just had Afghans fill in. And then later, when we joined up and we had a 12-man team, we would take 4 to 6 Marines out and then a handful of police officers, and we would just integrate it, try to mix it up. But one of the toughest things to overcome is like going through that doorway. I've never gone into a building knowing 100% sure that there is Taliban in there. I've never gone into a building like knowing like 0% there's absolutely no Taliban in there or IEDs. And, thousands and thousands of rooms and buildings I've cleared. And typically, we would try to get the Afghans to go through the door first. We figured it was their country, it was their mission. They can die first. I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's what we tried to do.
What was their kind of reaction to that?
Oh, I always just went through the door, but I've definitely seen many other Marines physically push people. Afghans into doorways first, like kick them, push them, throw them, whatever.
What did you kind of find like the fighting spirit, so to speak, was like with the Afghans that you worked with?
I would be dead if it wasn't for them. It's just like anything else. You have a level of professionalism. The American police, we have 450 years of experience based on English law and American law, and we're still not perfect. They had 4 years, but they were good in a fight. The ANCOP I talked about earlier, they would almost never shoot their guns because like they made fun of me for just like blasting away with the AK during the firefight. Like I put an entire mag into a window that an Afghan Taliban was shooting at us from, I think. And they fired like 6 rounds, entire firefight between like 6 of them. And the police commander was making fun of me. He's like, oh no, I told my guys they're responsible for every bullet. If they kill a kid with their bullet, like they're going to jail. Well, shit, they're more disciplined than me. But the local police, it's like I write about it in my book, the firefight I got in with them. Fearless, a lot of them. Most of the police commanders and a lot of the ANCOP, all the officers fought the Russians. The commander of the ANCOP I worked with, he had scars all over his legs from a Russian RPG. his executive officer was missing the ulna in his arm because it was shot out by a Russian PKM. Yeah, they knew how to fight, and they're pretty brave for the most part.
What was your kind of experience out there with IEDs?
They're just everywhere, man. You just never know. You know, you hope we find them. The first IED that we ever found, quote unquote, was we're on one of these patrols, and a local comes up and says, "Hey, I found an IED in this thing." It was like maybe an incomplete IED or something. Somebody just put some fertilizer in a water bottle and duct taped a piece of wire to it, as in the guy who told us about it, because they get money.
Oh, really?
For informing us of IEDs. So we paid this guy to make a fake IED and blow it up.
Fucking funny.
But no, I saw this picture on Instagram of this dude's body armor that had a bullet hole in it. And I was like, hey, I met a guy that had a shot like that. And it turned out to be the same guy. We went down to this place in Marjah, this little compound his company was holding, or platoon actually. And he had a map of their compound and area, and they had pins stuck into this map. And they were all around the building they're in. And I'm like, what's that? He's like, those are IEDs we found. And he's like, they're planting IEDs within 3 feet of our perimeter wall. And I was only supposed to be there for 3 hours at this dude's place just to check out the police officers. I was there for 3 days because our trucks kept getting blown up. And like the truck would come down the road, get blown up. And then me and another guy, he's like, hey, just watch. 10 minutes, they're going to plant another ID. And sure enough, this dude comes out, puts another ID in the same hole. And I was like, can we shoot him? Like, why aren't we shooting him? Too far away. And I literally just watched people playing IEDs and blow up my truck. That same place, there's like this little bridge, little footbridge going across the river. I walked over that probably 12 times that day. And then the next day, they found a 150-pound IED under there where the pressure switch had like dead batteries. I've never, thankfully, been in a blast. Found a lot of them. They're just everywhere because it's easy to do.
What worried you most out there in terms of like, was it small arms? Was it IEDs? Like, what was the
IEDs? For sure. I still have anxiety being a passenger in a vehicle. Like, because I had experienced being shot at, and I never got shot. So I was like, no, this isn't so bad. And in a foot patrol, ground combat, you're running around, you're in charge of your own destiny, right? Combat is 95% of individual actions and 5% taking orders and following orders. So it feels good to be in control of your life. If you're a passenger in a vehicle that's going to hit an IED, you have no control. And that personally was my biggest anxiety thing is I hated being in vehicles because my life was in somebody else's hands. And when I left Marjah, we were supposed to get a helicopter ride out. And the battalion that was there treated all of their linguists, interpreters so poorly that they all quit en masse. And being civilians, they got the first ride out. So they took our helicopter and then the next helicopter and the next helicopter. And then no helicopters were flying during the day at this time because the general almost got shot down during the day in Marjah. So they changed the rules. And they're like, hey, we're going to get you out of Marjah. We're going to find some guys driving to Camp Dwyer or somewhere, and you're going to get in the trucks. And I'm like, I'm going to die. And it was the longest ride of my life.
What was the kind of biggest surprise for you about Afghanistan?
The people. I grew up, as a impressionable teenager during the Bush-Cheney political era in the United States. And, it's, Middle East people are bad, blah, blah, blah. And then going to Afghanistan, I find out I'm not even in the Middle East. I'm in Southwest Asia, They're Asian. But I remember just walking around looking at people and thinking, they're no different than me. Like, these are just dads out here growing crops to provide for their family. And, just kids trying to have fun and learn and, people just trying to get through their day. And then some assholes come in here and threaten them and say, hey, you're going to do what I want you to do or we're going to kill you. Well, then the Marines show up and cause even more conflict and turn their lives into turmoil. Yeah, I would say I tried to experience the culture as much as I could, which I think I did more than the majority of people that deployed because I worked with the Afghans all day. I had breakfast with them. I had lunch, dinner with them often, made a lot of friends. But yeah, that was probably my biggest thing I took away from that. Like the surprise was, ever since I was a little kid, you hear in the early 90s, like, oh, don't go to Afghanistan. You're just going to die because they hate you because you're American.
So having worked so closely with them, spent so much time with them, what was it like for you when the evacuation was happening, when the country was being overrun by the Taliban?
My thought is, I always just think like, what happened to these guys I served with? Are they did they get out of the country? Are they even still alive? Are they given amnesty by the Taliban like they said they would? My wife was actually deployed during the fall of Afghanistan. She was in Qatar. And so a lot of the Afghan Taliban, or the Afghan refugees, were coming to the base she was at. So that was kind of interesting to see that. If I put myself in their shoes, Taliban's coming, I'm here. Am I going to stand and fight and try to hold off a Taliban and keep fighting when I know there's no air support, there's no medevac, there's no reinforcements, and nobody ever will come to help me? It's a last stand, or am I just going to bounce and try to stay alive? And on the other hand, it's like, it had to end somehow. And I don't see how it could have ended in a good way. You look at the parallels of Vietnam, and if the majority of the people wanted the North Vietnamese government to be their government, then, it's the legitimate government at that point. So if the majority of the people are content with the Taliban being the government, then it would be their legitimate government. At this point, it is what it is. I think it would be kind of neat, if I could go back someday. I just don't really see that to be a possibility.
What was the point for you when you decided to write about your experiences? What was the reasons behind it?
Well, it definitely wasn't to share. So I started writing this thing shortly, a couple of years after coming back. And it was just because I was realizing I was having such a hard time. I had pretty bad PTSD. So the book, I don't know if you looked at it all, but it only covers about 4 hours of my life. It's an experience of one patrol, one firefight. But I was having such a hard time, going through these memories and putting them in order. So I just started writing down everything I could remember. So what I thought, what I saw, what I smelled throughout the day, if I had any memory at all, I wrote it down in this Word document, and I would just, cut and paste it to get in the right order. And I just kept writing and writing and, writing my thoughts at the time. And after a couple of years of doing that, I started calling my friends that were there. And I was like, hey, you remember this happening? Did this happen in this order, or did this person do this first? And oh yeah, well, this happened. So I'm like, okay, that's what I thought. And I realized after, almost 10 years of doing that, I had this pretty long, detailed account of my memories of the event. People found out about it, people that I deployed with and their family members found out about it. So I started turning it into a narrative that somebody could read. Not difficult manner, I guess. Yeah. A large part of it also was not really spoiler alert, but a Marine was killed in the book that I write about. Abe Howard. A lot of it was his family was told one story by the Marine Corps about how his son died. And it always just kind of ate me up that that's the story that they were told. And it just was in no way the reality of what happened. It's, you got your family member and you're told he died, but you don't know how. And it's maybe people would want to have the option to find out. So I figured if I wrote this, that it would give them the option to read it if they wanted to.
Have you spoken to them about it?
I gave a copy to his mom. They've read an old draft that's way, way different than what anybody has here that nobody was supposed to read.
Right.
A lot of shit talking in that one. She left me a good review. I haven't talked to her in person yet, but I plan to.
And did it help you personally to get that out?
Yeah, I think it did. I'm not really an emotional guy, but I kind of am. I just don't like to show it or talk about it. But
Classic veteran.
It's been so long that after 14 years, it's something you could talk about, and I wrote about it, and other people can learn about it. The year after the event, the Marines family hosted an event, and my guys went up there, and they partied and drank, and a memorial event, and they wanted me to go, and I couldn't do it. Like, I felt so responsible for their son's death that I was like, I can't even see his family. And then eventually the next year I went, and then did it. We do this event every year, and I think it was 2020 that my wife commented that, like, his family and us Marines that were there, like, this is the first time we're actually talking about Abe and how he was killed and stuff like that. We would always just avoid the subject. So I think we're at the point now where it can be a healing thing to discuss it and talk about it. So,
well, I'll let people know where they can get and when they can connect to you and everything like that, mate. But I always have one question I want to kind of finish up on with someone, which is the old, knowing what you know now, knowing how you feel now, knowing what everything has come since, would you do it all again?
I've thought about that, right? Because not only all the mental stuff and all that and the loss, but like physically, I now have like asthma, and I cough myself to sleep for the last 6 years. I cough up blood, I can't breathe, and it's not a good way to live your life. But the answer to that question is absolutely. It's all worth it. I'll do it again.
Bro, thanks so much for your time today, mate. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. Sure, everyone's going to want to connect, find out more, but I really appreciate your time, bro.
Really appreciate you having me on. It's great.
Guys, thanks so much for listening to today's podcast. Jeff, thanks for coming on, mate. Really appreciate you giving up your time. And of course, if you guys want to find out more about Jeff's deployment, Jeff's thoughts, it's all in the Warfighters Lounge, a Marine's experience of combat in Marjah, Afghanistan. That's all linked down the show notes, so you can click on there and go and find out more about Jeff. And if you want to connect with Jeff on social media, I've linked up his social media user handles, etc., down in the show notes as well. Again, thank you for all you guys who picked up a copy of D-Day, The Unheard Tapes. I really appreciate that. We've kind of got more coming in the pipeline like that soon. And then most importantly, guys, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please do us a favor and tell a friend about it. Either make a post on social media, text a friend with a link, or tell someone with your mouth. Any way that you can get the word out is much appreciated. We rely on you guys sharing the podcast. Without it, we can't grow. Without it, we can't keep going. So please, please, please do share the podcast. We're very lucky that we have guests coming in and giving up their time. So if you could just share the podcast and kind of do a little favor back, then it would be very much appreciated. All right, we'll catch you next time, and we love you. Bye.